As we're entering the final phase of the BM vs PXG game, we're at a point in the story where there's one goal left. The final and most important goal in the NEL to decide who will be number 1, and the question now is what's left in the match and who will score the final goal. For who will win and score, I'll keep it bleak. BM will 100% win this match. So even if Charles can work with Rin and Shido now, they both won't score again. It'll be someone from BM. And before you mention the third option for PXG being Loki, if he wants to test and produce a chemical reaction with Charles, I do want to emphasize that he won't score now. I'll talk about his role later in the video, but to give a preview of my prediction, I think Loki will sub in, but BM managed to hold off against Loki for 3 minutes and he won't score. So who on BM will score the final goal? And to answer this, it will be Isagi through a chemical reaction with Ness, and I'm extremely confident this will happen. This final goal has been something I've been predicting ever since the end of the Manshine game, as we witnessed him see the relationship between Yukimiya and Isagi, and even after the Ubers game we witnessed him mesmerized by Isagi's magic. It's been a slow build up ever since the beginning of the NEL, but this will be Ness's moment to awaken and we'll finally see the chemical reaction between the two. As we know, the backstories usually dictate the character who have the biggest influence in the final goal. As we see Yukimiya have his backstory and end with scoring the final goal in the Manshine game, and we see Hiyori have his backstory before his assist in the Ubers game. And now Ness, not Kaiser, was the one to get his backstory. And if the same trend happens, then it'll be through Ness realizing his potential and awakening by assisting Isagi for the final goal. But to understand why, we have to look at Ness and Kaiser's relationship prior to this match. As we know, Kaiser was someone to limit Ness's development. He told him to stop thinking for himself and directly manipulated the relationship for him to be codependent and reliant on Kaiser. However, that's not the route for his development and Kaiser knows this, which is why I believe he went out of his way to tell him to break free, find a new king and develop. I truly believe Kaiser learned that he does in fact care for Ness as a human, not just a tool, when he went through his despair and development, which is why he instantly told Ness to free himself after his goal. And it's important to know he told him during the middle of the game. Kaiser could have told him after the match to tell him this to increase his odds of beating Isagi, but he told him during this moment to give Ness a chance to realize his own potential and to awaken and develop now. Kaiser may treat Ness horribly as he chucks water on him or constantly berate him with insults, but he is someone who is unfamiliar with affection, and even though their relationship is fairly toxic, I truly believe Kaiser does care for Ness deep down, but he doesn't know how to verbalize it or show it. Also, quick side note, but Kaiser likes to call Ness a stray dog, and in the recent extra chapter it specifically states that's his favorite animal, which I think is kinda neat and does show he does like him. Anyway, going back on track, Kaiser is someone who wishes to be loved, which Ness does, although not specifically romantic, but he will now be someone who can now love others, which is important for his character growth, as it's something he struggled with in his backstory. He went from someone who doesn't understand people and affection to realizing he does like Ness and showing his love in his own way by giving him this opportunity to evolve and awaken, and he does so by telling him to find a new king. Something important to note is that Kaiser did not develop until Isagi scored and broke him down to his lowest and experiencing true despair. The first 3 games had him live comfortably and not struggle through this adversity to evolve, as he was just simply too good. But when Isagi scored at the beginning of the match, just like Rin, they both acknowledged that Isagi was better and were beginning to feel the despair. As a result, we saw Kaiser act extremely irrationally, missing shots, losing possession, etc. That is until he re-evaluated his true desire and understood himself. He got fired up, deciding to work with Raichi and the other Blue Lockers, and it ended up scoring the most satisfying goal in the NEL. If you look at Kaiser after his goal, he tells Ness his gratitude, and we see Kaiser for once in his life show human connection as he thanks him, something he could never do prior to this match. But he tells him this is where their potential lies, and he doesn't need him. There is no malice or hatred in his words, it's just to do with their future potential, which parallels Nagi and Ryo's relationship, but that's a story for another day. Obviously Ness is hurt, but Kaiser is someone who understands Ness the best, and even though it's portrayed as his own benefit, I guarantee you he is also considering that he himself is destroying Ness's development, which is why he tells him to find a new king in the middle of the match. Don't forget, Kaiser read all the psychology books in human emotion and molded Ness into who he is now, and understands his true ego and personality better than anyone else in the story. Kaiser knows by not letting him think and limiting his plays, then he would rely on his brilliance, but as a changed person who does care for Ness, he realized he was never going to evolve to a proper midfielder like Charles or Sai if he relies on Kaiser exclusively. Another thing to consider is the ego types, and even though Isagi is the one classifying these ego types, I wouldn't be shocked if Kaiser was aware or subconsciously understood them too. And the important thing to note is everyone's known ego types. We know a handful of people's ego types specifically, but there are a few characters highlighted in the story like Rin, Charles, Kaiser, and most importantly Ness that Isagi had to understand. As the match continues, he understands Kaiser, Rin, and Charles' ego types, and the only one missing now is Ness's. And so the final goal will definitely involve Isagi understanding Ness's ego type, where I believe he will be a self-styled and a freedom type egoist, and they'll perform a chemical reaction to secure first place in the NEL. Ness himself was depicted as a magician, a class that is specifically known for its creativity and magic, so I think it's pretty evident that he is at least a creative type egoist, especially since his character so far has highlighted his magic being limited and restricted. But the reason I believe he is a self-type egoist instead of a world type is simply his backstory. He is someone who gets excited from the unexplained, and the thing that sparked the most magic is the soccer he watched, and most importantly, him becoming someone who can cast a spell on the whole world. His dream is not set in achievements, but in finding magic. As the match continues, we still see him try and please Kaiser and get his approval, to show he can be someone who can help him evolve. But even then, Kaiser dismisses him, telling him once again to find someone else. He needs to change to evolve, and he can't do that if he assists Kaiser again. And so the only two people left in the match who can score from Ness are either Isagi or Kunigami, and I'm pretty confident it will be Isagi. An important theme in this match is that new midfielders and chemical reactions lead to evolutions, and the fact super goals are the only ones that will be scored in this final game. And this theme is really highlighted from Charles' involvement in the match, as Loki was molding him to be the perfect midfielder by cultivating new opportunities and evolutions with both Rin and Shido. And we also had Kaiser awaken by expanding his options. So if Ness is to evolve like the other midfielders and plays in this match, he needs to assist someone other than Kaiser. With the 4 goals being the expected goal scorers before the match, the final goal will be a battle for first place, and it makes sense that Isagi scores it. Don't forget, Isagi's whole objective in the NEL is to become rank 1 before the U20 World Cup, and he will be only ready for this when he can decisively say he is the best of those players. As the main character, he scores the final goal all the time, besides the second selection of course, but this time will be no different. He goes into this final match saying he does not want to be second place to those two, and the fact that if he doesn't overtake a Rin in the ranking, then it will all be for nothing. And what better way than scoring the final goal in the NEL? But the most definitive reasoning for Ness assisting Isagi is the fact that he already acknowledged his magic, the same stuff that Kaiser mesmerized him with. We've gone from him hating him in the first game, to observing Yuki and Isagi's relationship before breaking out in the second, and finally not even confronting him, just standing there mesmerized by the brilliance in the last play. And so he is progressively being entranced by Isagi, and even though I've seen some cool theories in the RPG theory, as a magician and hero team up, it's looking like Isagi scores the final goal is the most likely option. When Isagi scored his goal, we have a moment where Rin and Kaiser rage, as they start to think Isagi was better than them. And so even though coming to the match Rin and Kaiser was slightly above Isagi, his first goal basically leveled the playing field and made it dangerously close that the other two start panicking. But since Kaiser scored, he pushes this limit in Kaiser's favor once again, and similarly Rin scored and pushed this limit to be above Isagi again, so Isagi is once again playing catch up. So the final goal not only means he becomes rank 1, but he does so by overcoming Kaiser and Rin in their peak performances, and showing the world he is ready to lead Japan to victory in the U20 World Cup. With 2 goals, then Isagi can bump his final offer to 250 million, while Rin 248, at least that's my personal prediction, based on Corona's observations about the salaries. If the super goals are worth 50 million, and Rangers had a random 198 offer instead of just a rounded up number like 200, then I think there's a good chance it has a more important meaning. With Isagi scoring 2 goals, he can fulfill his hunger and originality of becoming rank 1, while also displaying Ness and Kaiser at an extremely high level. With Ness awakening and assisting Isagi, the match will conclude, and to the shock of the world, it won't be of Ness assisting Kaiser. It will end with them talking and probably Isagi thanking Ness or questioning him, and I think the biggest shock will be Kaiser actually happy for Ness instead of angry, like the previous times Isagi beat him. Kaiser may be sad he lost, but there's no betrayal made, and so their relationship will thrive going forward, and it'll set up for Ness as someone who is not reliant on others, but someone with an immense creative ego. And so when Germany entered the U20 World Cup, it will be significantly stronger than what we saw in the NEL, seeing as the 2 key players in Germany's team, Ness and Kaiser, evolved tremendously in the end of the NEL. But besides Isagi scoring the final goal, there's so much left in the match to discuss, and a question to ask is how many chapters are left. Well, both the 3rd and 4th goals were 9 chapters long, which is a full volume's length, and I also think the final goal will be at least 9 chapters long, and more specifically around 14 chapters, especially considering the final goal in each arc typically takes a bit longer. And the main reason I believe it's 14 chapters is because I strongly believe that the NEL will end at the beginning of 2025, and the conclusion of the arc will finish at the same time season 2 of the anime finishes, mainly to increase sales. However, if there are 3 volumes to be released, including Reen's goal, then we would need 3 more characters on the covers. For the latest volume, I believe Charles is the most appropriate, but to the other 2, I believe they will include Neru and Igaguri. The latter is basically confirmed to sub in and have at least one big moment in the match, so having a cover makes sense. On the other hand, Neru has been sidelined since the beginning of the NEL, and there has been no build up for him to actually enter the match. But there's no one else in the story with potential to sub in and be relevant enough for a cover, unless it's something like Isagi with an updated cover. The final 2 chapters will be about Isagi and Ness's goal and its build up, and I think the rest of the volume will be about the salaries, who survives the top 23, and Bastard Munich's celebration, and we may also see FC Barca and Manshine's final game. But before then, we still have 12 other chapters to discuss, and with Reen's goal, we can finally see some more substitutions in the game. For PXG, the remaining potential substitutes include Loki, Endoji, Yuzu, and Cho. Cho already has a salary and PXG don't need another striker, so I doubt he will play. However, the other 2 I would say have a non-zero chance of subbing in, although very unlikely. I've mentioned before on the channel, but Yuzu is specifically the only blue locker we will potentially not see in the manga or even spin-off, as he has no relationships with Naki. This could be his only opportunity to be further explored. Meanwhile, Endoji I think missed his chance. When Bayern Munich scored their 2nd goal and called Kaiser a superstar, which is his motive, I thought there was a chance PSG was struggling defensively and so they'd sub him in. But the other reason I think both can actually sub in is to explore PXG's philosophy about money, where if they win they guarantee a good salary enough to make the top 23. But I'm not expecting much even if they sub in. I'm just optimistic there's a chance they could play, although very unlikely. Now the only PXG player I'm confident will sub in is the master striker Loki. As Charles experienced a chemical reaction with both Reen and Shido, I think Loki may want to experiment and see if he can produce a goal with him too. But the thing is, Charles may not want to pass to Loki, as this is a contrarian, and so it'll be interesting to see how it will play out, seeing as he will have so many options on PXG to choose from. As for the rest of PXG who are already playing, I'm not expecting much more from Nanase, as he's had his fair share of moments this match already, but potentially he could lose potential and basically ruin his chance of surviving, especially if he is to get the 24th spot like I'm predicting. As the match enters the later phase, we're entering Tokumitsu's zone, where his stamina will shine, and so I'm expecting at least one good play from him similar to Ayu in the Ubers game, especially since he kinda needs it as he hasn't really done much in this match. As for Karasu, I was expecting him to develop Metavision early into this match, but it's been pretty good consistently without it, that I don't even know if he will actually have it until the U20 World Cup, where he can have his development then. Then for Zentetsu, he has been sent to shut down Kunigami, and from what we've seen it does actually work, which makes PXG significantly scarier. But another interesting thing we could see is if Loki and Zentetsu have a chemical reaction based on their acceleration. especially if we see them in episode Nagi. As for the two primary strikers, Rin and Shido, they won't score again. Instead, I'm guessing they will be stopped by people like Ikiguri, Kagamaru, Isuki, etc. and basically exist to highlight Bayern Munich's defensive capabilities. As for the substitutes on Bayern Munich, unlike Loki, I think there's a chance Noah doesn't sub in, which is absurd as the Master Strikers are so good, but I think there's a chance. When Lavino subbed in, there were 2 goals in 3 minutes, and every other time a Master Striker has subbed in the field, there's been a goal. So if Loki subs in, how can they survive 3 minutes when they couldn't even handle Ubers with Snuffy and Noah on the field helping them? And honestly, it's just a hunch, and I think it's just because Charles is a contrarian, making the game harder than it should be for Loki. Then since Loki wants to develop Charles and form a chemical reaction with him instead of actually winning the match, then that can be a reason Bayern Munich survived the 3 minutes without Noah, where Charles will simply just not pass to Loki. Logically, Noah will substitute in as a defender since it's the rational play to not lose, and honestly there's no real reason against him playing I can think of besides letting the other Blue Lockers shine. However, what I think will happen is he'll ask the Blue Lockers if they're comfortable without him for the 3 minutes and if they can hold on, which they accept. Then we can have characters like Ikiguri, Kagamaru, Yukamiya and Neru display huge feats against Loki, meaning they can shine without scoring and having 0 game time up until this point. Of those 4 options, I think the only 2 people who must sub in are Yukamiya and Ikiguri. Although a lot of people hate him and he's portrayed as bad, he has been hyped up to play so much that he'll definitely sub into the game. He had a full chapter before this match talking to Isuki about what he has to do and he figured something out. We've also had Noah carefully watch both Kiora and Ikiguri grind and train to get good enough stats to warrant a position in the team, and he has been somewhat consistently improving his militia foul to trick the VARs. He will 100% sub in, but what will his role be in the match? And to me it's obvious that he will use his militia foul to stop someone scoring. Coming into the match I thought it'd be Shido, but we've had 3 moments in the match of Rin being on the verge of a foul and having Raichi question the VAR. The fact that it's been highlighted so much tells me that Ikiguri will successfully bait Rin into fouling him. Now the issue with this militia foul is that fans will cry and complain if he used the tactical foul to prevent PXG from winning, and so I'm not sure how the author will tackle this issue. A potential other candidate he could use his militia foul on is actually Loki. I know people hate this idea, but his whole theme of Buddha luck means I wouldn't write it out as a possibility, and he is unironically one of the only people I think could stop him by sheer luck alone. I'm not sure if Ikiguri will play against Loki or sub in after he's off, but he'll stop at least one person on PXG from scoring. The other Bayern Munich member who will 100% sub in is Yukamiya. As a huge fan of his, I'm annoyed how he's been written in the Ubers and PXG game, as he hasn't even subbed in yet. After his moments with Ego talking about proving his worth to Ajax before the NEL ends, we haven't seen him do anything noteworthy since his goal in the Manshine game to prove it yet. So he has to sub in for some huge moment, but I just don't see where he fits into the team. Like looking at the field, we basically have 9 notable players already, and the only position left for him is a centre back, which is not where he's best suited given his skill set, unless Raichi or Kunigami drop down, freeing up another position. But even if he subs in, then what does he even do? He can't contribute to the goal since there's no narrative reason for him to assist or score, and I just don't get his future role in the match. That's why I think he may contribute as someone to stop Loki, where he can showcase something to Ajax, because I just don't see what else he can do to prove himself. Alternatively, Yukamiya has been someone whose shots have always been hyped up to show some defensive feat for the enemies, whether it be the 3rd selection, the U20 match or even the NEL, and so his shot could be blocked once again from PXG's defensive side. Whether it's an offensive or defensive play, he'll definitely have at least one good moment before the NEL concludes. The 3rd person who may sub in is Neru. I must be the biggest glazer for this guy, but if there's 14 chapters and he gets a volume cover, I wouldn't be shocked if he subs in and is used to limit Loki's speed, similar to how Raichi limited Snuffy's options. I think he'll sub in for Menza and be primarily used for defensive plays. But the biggest issue with this guy is if he was to sub in, then someone else is required to be sent off if both Yukamiya and Ikiguri are to sub in later, which I do think is a possibility. And the other reason I think he may sub in is because Noah is a stats guy. Neru definitely has better stats than Ikiguri, and so it makes more sense for him to sub in and have Ikiguri be the final member on the team to finally play. A big thing with characters' final moments is they always fail the first time they attempt their moment. Kunigami missed his shot, Yukimiya failed to score due to Chris, Hiri was stopped by Sendo, and even Kaiser whiffed his shot before scoring. These evolutions require them to hit rock bottom and fail before awakening to actually impact the final goal. And so somewhere in the middle of the match, both Ness and Isagi should fail before their grand moment. Then when it comes to the final goal, I believe Ness can finally learn to pass to a spot where both Kaiser and Isagi can meet, like Rin and Shido just did, or he picks Isagi over Kaiser to score the final goal. Another character's moment I'm excited for is Gagamaru, as he's done nothing so far. PXG have scored in both shots, and so he's bound to have at least one GOAT Maru moment. Personally, I was hoping he'd do more in this match by stopping both Rin and Shido, but unfortunately hasn't yet, but his moment will definitely happen soon. Then for the Corona, Hiro and Raichi trio, all have at least contributed with plays, and so they all have probably small moments before the match ends, but nothing crazy. Kunigami is also in a weird spot. He was putting his body on the line to crush Shido, and so I could see him potentially injuring himself to stop him, which may give someone like Neru or Ikiguri an opportunity to sub in. But I don't think that's very likely, and instead Kunigami has to surpass his limits once again to stop Shido, and be the hero to defeat the villain. I also think they may actually completely skip the long awaited wildcard backstory that I know people want to see, at least until after the match. But the character from Barca Munich who was foreshadowed to do more is Kiura, as he was highlighted to have one more key moment, and if he wants to be a borderliner and get that 23rd highest spot, then he needs this moment, as a singular assist isn't enough judging by the previous losses. Since Kiura has stated he has no allegiance and does whatever favors himself, then I could see him try to assist Isagi, Kunigami or Yukimiya, or be a third contributor for the final goal as he passes to Ness. But he still has a bit more to display before the match concludes. As for Kaiser, I think he'll just continue doing his own thing, and maybe potentially stopping Rashido, Rin or even Loki. And by the end of the match, he'll be working with Isagi as a teammate. Speaking of Isagi, I think similar to Ness, he has to fail once before his final goal to signify his growth and awakening. Potentially Kuro will pass a game-winning assist to Isagi that is stopped, but Isagi will do so much in this match anyway as he tries to exceed Rin and Kaiser that he will have his fair share of moments, including potentially swapping Loki with Kaiser, and most of all scoring the final goal as he becomes number 1 in the NEL. As for the timeline, I'm guessing that next chapter will be about the reactions to Rin's goals, and the substitutions including Loki for PXG, and then Barca Munich some combination of Noah, Yukimiya, Neru and Ikiguri. I'm still iffy about Noah joining, but we will see next chapter. The game plan for Barca Munich is just to withhold the 3 minutes until Loki is sent off, and the match starts with Barca Munich starting with possession. We can then have PXG hold off from their attack, which potentially could involve Ness having their failing moment, with Isagi learning his ego type, and then PXG can start their counterattack with Loki. In my mind, Loki does not want to just score, he wants to score through a chemical reaction with Charles, so even though he could probably solo Barca Munich, we haven't passed to Charles trying to force it. Then since we had Isagi and Kaiser so far up the field, and Loki's insane speed, it will be up to the other blue lockers to limit his movements and slow them down, while the two aces catch up to help. But what I think will happen next is Charles gets in a position where he can pass to Loki, but he doesn't. He takes the contrarian option and passes to Shido, as we see once again Sentai to free him from Kunigami. But now we have Gagamaru's epic save moment, as he either deflects or catches the ball, and basically Barca Munich recover from this moment. I think we'll then have Yukimiya's moment where he can link up with someone like Isagi and dribble past a lot of the PXG's defense like Karasu, Tokumitsu, etc. We could have Yukimiya attempt to score and get stopped by Loki, or maybe Kura is added to the mix and passes to Isagi, the current underdog, and gets stopped. And so once again PXG have possession and start their counterattack, and depending on who is subbed in for Barca Munich, we could have Noah and Loki match up, or even something like Raichi and Neru try to stop him, while Kaiser and Isagi fall back. Once again we can have Charles get a hold of the ball, and this time he does in fact pass to Loki, but gets stopped by Isagi and Kaiser working together, and as a result the time runs out and Loki is sent off as Barca Munich has successfully held off for 3 minutes. An alternative for this moment is if Ikiguri is subbed in next chapter, then I believe it will be him stopping Loki with his militia foul. However, if Ikiguri has not subbed in yet, then I think once Noah subs off, he can come in instead, and he's the one to stop Rin from a corner kick, or however that situation transpires, but he'll exploit the VAR system to get tempo for the Barca Munich. As the game returns to normal and no master strikers, the final play will have every single character's moment, in a back and forth between the two teams. Then the final play will involve Ness kicking to a spot that both Kaiser and Isagi can reach or passes to Isagi. But either way, I think Ness's pass will have a lot of spin, and we have Isagi score through a direct curve shot in front of Rin, Shido and Kaiser. And with that goal, Barca Munich win the match, and Isagi places first in the NEL. And as always, thanks for watching, Buddha be praised, and have a good day.